morning, Soul Center.
Good morning, Jason.
It's so good to be with you guys on this morning. It's so good to be with someone so dear to me, Deanna. So grateful that she's here today. That song is a song, without putting all her business out there, is a song that's written primarily by a person who's gone through and done the work. You don't write songs like that if you have not done what is needed to make yourself available so that something like that can move through you. And so I honor her and recognize her on this day as we acknowledge the fatherhood principle in this country on this day. And so I honor even my father on this day, and excited to honor fatherhood in principle, right? Because one of the wonderful things about the age that we live in is technology, social media connects us in such a way that if you develop your circles well, they serve you and nurture you, right? I mean, that even before social media, you always had friends that would introduce you to new ideas and concepts from their experiences and where they're going. And so one of the other things during the Mother's Day and Father's Day celebrations that has been brought into my awareness is to also honor that it's a trigger for those who have all sorts of experiences of motherhood and fatherhood. A lot of people did not grow up with a father. A lot of people, their father passed before they matured enough to meet them. Some people's fathers died in wars and never made it home. There are women who get pregnant by their husbands, and their husbands were taken off to war and never came home, and they never met their father. And there are all sorts of ways that this thing that we call fatherhood, this thing that we call motherhood exists. And so one of the beautiful things that I've been gifted is things like that, is to be able to honor it all. And to also honor the fathers who did not show up in a way that really we feel like we're nurturing, right? Because there are all kinds of ways human beings show up in whatever roles they show up as. So maybe we don't talk about fatherhood, but maybe we talk about the cashier that just is rude and disrespectful. So sometimes if we can have a rude and disrespectful cashier because they're going through whatever they're going through in their life, certainly a father could show up like that. Certainly a parent could show up like that. So we know that as a part of the experience of interacting with other human beings on this journey that we call life, we know that people are going to show up however they show up. And so we also on Father's Day take the opportunity to acknowledge people who have gone through that experience. And so by doing that, nobody's left out. Because we get back to the principle of oneness. We get back to the connectivity. We get back into this now moment. And so my talk title for today, in reflecting on the theme of the month here at Soul Center, from setback to comeback, was really effective of this whole timeline thing that we're often talking about. You know, the past, the present, and the future. And there's a reality in the midst of all of that, that the only thing that we're ever in is now. This moment, right here, right now. This is all we ever had. We may have had something that we call the past, but that was then. When it wasn't the past, it at some point was now. And the reality of that also allows us to peer into the future. And we know that no matter what happens in the future, at some point, it is also going to become a now, right? So if we move into a universal principle that everybody can agree with, that's not something that's subject to whether or not we believe in the resurrection. It's not subject to whether we primarily use the Quran. It's not subject to any book or principle. This is a universal principle. And so we are reminded that we are in a universal teaching. We are in a universal teaching that is not limited by the culture that you were born into. It's not limited by the book that you read. And yet the principles and the teachings of this community and of communities like this in New Thought are that the principles are universal. Yes?
Yes.
All right. So as we move into this, my topic is from now to now, where it all happens. Right? Oh, we can get a little bit of that going. Got Steve over there. So one of my traditions when I come to Soul Center is I'm not really the lay back and sit and listen to the professor lecture and give his talk. That's not really me. We make a little bit of noise. We're alive. We're living beings, right? So Steve, show him how to do it. So sometimes when you hear something that resonates with you, you might make a little bit of noise. That's all right. You might speak. You might amen. You might shout. None of that is distracting. I'm not trying to remember what I'm going to say. I'm letting the Spirit do all the talking. And then when I stutter, that's generally me. But everything else, all the cool stuff, the smooth stuff, the inspiring stuff, I get out of the way. So when we're talking about this idea of from setbacks to comebacks, I really like it because there is this idea as if because a thing has happened, that thing that once happened, once upon a now, is continual. That it is in this continual spectrum with you, hanging over you, right? Some of you guys remember the Peanuts cartoon. And there are a couple of characters on that show that are great metaphors for spirituality. But one of them has a dark cloud over his head, and every time, I can't think of his name right now, every time he walks by something, disaster strikes. And so as he's walking past the construction workers, suddenly the scaffolding comes by. As he's walking past the cement mixer, the guy's all done, he does his last streak, and then a herd of cats just runs through, and he tries to stop them, he slips and he falls, disaster strikes. But that's how we look at some of the challenges and difficulties that we go through. But you ever notice that we never really do that about the good stuff? We don't generally like have an amazing experience and it's just wonderful in love and just like, ooh, next moment it's going to be just like that. Next moment it's going to be just like that. No. What is that about? It is about a limited idea. It is about a limited concept of what is possible, and it is the patterns that we learn from our fathers, our mothers, our peers, our colleagues, and coworkers. You will notice a difference in people who have been trained to see what is possible. So like in the military, they teach you and they train you to see a room and to see any type of scenario that could go on in the room. What could that person do? What could that person do? What could that person do? What could that person? And we're not even talking about, anything worrisome. We're just looking at the scenarios in the room. When the president goes somewhere, they send the Secret Service agents and they have a whole group of people that go to every hallway, to every building and everywhere. How could something bad happen? And what can we do to prevent it, or at least to make us see in case anything happens? Well, what if we took that back and we said, what is possible? What if we walked into any situation and said, oh my God, oh, how good could this be? The people who are looking for that perfect divine partner, where is he at? Where is she at? Are they ready for me today? That person that's looking for that divine right job? Oh, who's looking to hire? Who's like, you looking for me? I'm right here. That's what we could do. Could you do that? Could you imagine investing your money, investing your time? Could you imagine looking at every single kid? The kids with the pants sagging, the kids with the tattoos on their neck, the kids with the tattoos and their piercings in their lip, and saying, oh my God, what kind of artist are you? What painting or mural are you going to create? What new thing are you going to invent? Oh, you were dealing with this type of thing right here. Oh, you don't think you're into drugs? No, you're a chemist. What type of thing could you invent? You think you're into violence? You want to beat people? Oh no, you're into strength training. You're into dynamic uses of manipulation of physical principles. What are you going to do with that? What's possible? But the thing is, we get caught up in the other thing. We get caught up in the least. And the thing is, that's easy. I've been in a lot of interesting conversations. Those of you that are in social media with me, sometimes you'll see I have very interesting conversations on my social media timeline. Not on the public one, that's the speaker one, the other one. And in the other one, we'll have lots of conversations about things. And one of the things that I'm most fascinated by is how often when people are going through challenges, suddenly that is how they view the world. Suddenly people who have gone through divorce or going through divorce suddenly become this whole expert on male, female, female dynamic relationships. And they know everything all of a sudden because it's a worthless institution, marriage, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then somebody slides in that just got married. It's like, well, I'm doing pretty good. And somebody else slides in and says, well, I'm surrounded by people who've been married for 20 plus years. And then, we have to reevaluate some of these things. And far too often, we're living based on limited ideas. We're living based on limited concepts, specifically concepts that are not eternal. And so the thing about this teaching is, you want to evaluate the ideas and concepts that you have to see whether they are always true or they are true based on my misguided decision making. Some of us have to be able to acknowledge, just in terms of partnership, is that we chose the wrong partner. And we chose partners for the wrong reason. We do that with jobs all the time now. Right? We realize that we went and got a particular college degree. Those of you that have graduated from college in the last 20 years or have children that did, realize that many of the decisions that we made when we go into career was not in alignment with the economic system in the country and was not really in alignment with anything to do with the soul. Right? So when it comes to getting a job, it makes sense that you're in a job that's passionless, that doesn't nurture you, when you didn't choose your major or degree based on that. And you have a society here, at least in America, that does not reward you for doing things that nurture you. It generally doesn't. It took a long time before your insurance company would encourage you to even go to the gym, which seems like it would be right in their pocket. We want to insure people who are taking better care of their bodies, but it wasn't until maybe the last 15 years that you started seeing that as a note, even on your insurance and your tax forms and things like that. We were talking about taxes earlier today. And so when you start looking at how these things you approach these things, recognizing the difference between opinion and experience, ideas, and spiritual law and spiritual principles. Now, when you look at those things, you're able to balance them out a little differently. When I got the theme of the month at the end of last month, we were coming into this month, I started getting it earlier from Jessica so I could ruminate on it a little more. And it reminds me of a phrase that Reverend Michael often uses. Instead of saying, his version of it is, you change the experiences from tombstones, like one of my favorite movies, to stepping stones. Right? So you imagine like a graveyard and everybody's trying to bury everything in the graveyard. We just, let the dead bury the dead, phrases like that. But instead of that, what if we were building upon those things, even if we were to utilize them? Imagine if everybody, instead of some epitaph on their tombstone, had wisdom. What if it was the most wise thing that they knew about life was put on their tombstone, so that when you walk through a graveyard, you were to see constant inspiration. Somebody telling you about how they raised their children, how they took care of their family, maybe the secret to their financial future. Or well, it's their past back then, because they're buried. So these things are possible, but that's not the approach that we use. So often, we're caught up in the ditches, and when some things get caught up in a ditch, it seems like it's almost impossible to get them out. There's a minister that I used to hear a long time ago, Kenneth Hagin. He used to talk about you're on the path, but too often you get caught into the ditch on the left and on the ditch on the right side of the road, and you can't get anywhere. And I have driven literally into a ditch before, and it's not one of my proudest moments. Doing everything I shouldn't have been doing. Brian was one of my good friends, was in the car with me. He just shook his head. It was like, what were you doing, man? It's like, I don't know. I won't even tell you. I'll tell you. It's a perfect thing to tell you. How many of you have ever reached into the back seat while you're driving down? That's what I was doing. But I was doing the advanced version while turning. See? That was so worth sharing because that's going to lead into the next two things that I'm going to say. So I literally crashed into a ditch. But that reminds me of there was this amazing farmer who cared for all of his animals and all of his creatures wonderfully. Not only did he care for them, he literally loved them. He cherished them. They were all precious to him. And one day, his most precious donkey fell into a ditch. Fell into a ditch so deep that it broke his heart because he couldn't figure out how to get the donkey out of it. Anybody ever fallen into a ditch? Anybody ever gone through anything difficult and you did not know how you were going to get your way out? Right? And the farmer is looking and he's brokenhearted. And sometimes on farms, they put animals down. When they're wounded, when they're broken, and it can be very difficult. So the farmer, when trying to evaluate what to do, decides, it's like rather than just leave the donkey in the ditch, I'll bury him alive. Bury him alive at the very least. If I bury him alive, he won't suffer for weeks and weeks and weeks in this hole. So it's noon. He starts shoveling dirt into the hole where the donkey is. Anybody ever threw stuff on you when you were going through difficult stuff? You mean you don't have people that pile on and make it more difficult for you to see your way through? Well, the donkey's in the hole. Farmer takes the dirt, starts shoveling it on the donkey. Well, the donkey's like, what's going on? I'm in a hole, and he's throwing dirt on me. Well, the donkey just shakes it off. And so the farmer keeps shoveling dirt onto the donkey in the hole. And the donkey keeps looking up like, come on, man. Shakes it off. But then he lifts up his feet. And then he shovels some more. And then he shakes it off. And then he lifts up his feet again. And the farmer starts to realize that the more dirt he shovels on the donkey, the more dirt that the donkey shakes off. And this is just not really working the way the farmer thought. But the process continues until the farmer has placed so much dirt into the hole until the donkey has shaken off every grain of dirt that the farmer tried to put on top of him, that it now became all underneath the donkey's feet, and then the donkey ends up walking out of the hole. Because there is no limit to what is possible. Especially if you're not in agreement with the situation. Now the donkey could have sat down, laid down, and been buried alive. Anybody interested in that? I mean, that's just not only is that not how I want to go, but that's not how I want to live this now moment. I don't want to live now suffocating. I don't want to live now with the pressure of the earth, the world on top of me, just because you, or my friends, or my loved ones, or my cousins, or my family, or my boss, or my supervisor, or the people who are in my industry can't see the vision of what I'm holding and see me only as being in a ditch. The number of people, including our president, who have dug themselves into financial ruin only to end up on the other side of it economically is too numerous to name. But it did not serve President Trump or any other economic person or business person any good to just lay down and be buried underneath the weight of debt, underneath the weight of a divorce and how it impacts people financially, underneath the debt of emotional challenges and frustrations. That doesn't do us any good. We were talking about Father's Day earlier, and there's a wonderful principle. And I'm going to say two things. One, there's far too little taught in America about Africa. When you go through the system, I'm a former history teacher, we tell all about world history. We talk all about Europe, but we miss out on all the lessons that the African cultures have to teach us. And all cultures have something to teach us. And so it's important that we recognize this. So the idea that I'm going to bring forth right now is an African teaching about an idea called Sankofa. Everybody say Sankofa.
Sankofa.
So Sankofa is a principle that says, go back and get it. In one way it's translated, go back and get it. In the other way it's translated, it is not wrong to go get back and get what you've left behind. So everybody say Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Sankofa is depicted as a bird facing this direction, looking backwards, flying, with an egg in its beak. So body's this way, head is this way, there's an egg, often golden, in its beak. To depict the idea that no, you don't just look back in the past. If you're looking back in the past, you better be purposeful. If you're looking back at your last relationship, if you're looking back at your last job, if we're going to tell the story, we have to be going back to tell the story to get the golden nugget. We have to be doing it with a purpose. Otherwise, you can't live there. Too often, we're going back to the past and we're just revisiting it. When the Holocaust survivors teach about the Holocaust, and people rarely ever have conversations with them about not talking about it. Specifically because when we listen to them, we hear that they're trying to consistently teach us so that this never happens to any other group on the planet again. People of African descent who are heirs of the journey of kidnapped Africans, also known as slaves, do the same thing. Except there's a little judgment because in America we haven't reconciled what it meant to realize that we are literally, all of us, standing upon the shoulders of those people. We could deal with it better and we could have those conversations better if we could reconcile it, right? So with that idea, no one should ever, in any of our conscious awareness, be with the idea of slavery without seeing that it's a lesson consistently there to teach us. To teach us how easy it was for millions of people to be taken from their homes and to be placed somewhere else, and that there were people alive that lacked compassion in such a way that they did not see other human beings as human. Sankofa. It is essential that we recognize it is important for us all to go back and get the nuggets. It is important, primarily on a day like Father's Day, that fathers realize that you are here to bring the nuggets to this place, in this now moment. We start talking about from tombstones to stepping stones. We talk about from setback to comeback. Here's the thing. You have to go back and get the lesson that you were supposed to learn. You go through not a single experience in this life where you are not supposed to glean a lesson. I also want to make sure you get the right lesson. The lesson is never that you were wrong. The lesson is never you were at fault. The lesson is never that. The lesson is always a principle or concept that is universally applicable. So, if you've been through trauma, and if you've been through tragedy, you look back, and often we start looking at what happened, who interacted, and how it happened. That is not the lesson. The lesson is, I'm still here. I went through this, and I'm still here. They tried to do this to my body, do this to my mind, but I'm still here. Yes?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Sankofa.
Will you go back and get what is yours?
Yes.
Is there anything that you can think of that you could go back and that there's a lesson for you to bring forward? Can anybody think of anything? Anything? Oh yeah. What about oh yeah?
Oh yeah.
In this life, the gifts that we are exchanging, sometimes they're in boxes, they have bows on them. Sometimes they are ourselves. Most of the time, the gift of who we are in this now moment one of the things that we must realize is that everything at some point, again, was now. Every now moment is a new beginning. Every single one of them. So before Deanna sang her song, you had never heard it. You're not the same person now after having heard that song. I see it. Go ahead, let it out. I see y'all with your little baby. Y'all so cute. But that's the reality. Now, we had meditation this morning. We're not the same people we were before meditation. So if you've gone through a struggle, if you've gone through a challenge, if you've lost someone, you don't lose anyone. Right. You don't lose anyone. Where's my handkerchief? It's in here somewhere. Bam! Like a magician. But the reality is, this represents Bishop Joseph W. Wright. He would be preaching, speaking, spitting on everybody, and he was my grandfather. And he's the lineage that I come from. As more and more every day that I accept that I'm called to teach and speak principle, law. So sometimes you guys won't see this, but this will be in my pocket sometimes. And it's a reminder. Most of you know about the bow ties that I wear. My father wore bow ties. I thought it was weird. It wasn't cool. But it really was. But there's an opportunity for me to connect with my dad today. He transitioned 4 years ago. More now than ever before. I can get past all of his human frailties, his human inadequacies. I can get past any aspect of him that annoyed me, frustrated me. I can get past all of those moments and get the truth. I can go back and do that. It's why it's an essential practice. It's why it is an essential practice. Because we don't live this life this second. And as my buddy Willard says all the time, none of us get out of here alive. That's his joke. I love that joke. And if you want, desire, hunger, thirst for, feel like you need peace, joy, love, grace, harmony, more beauty in the world. You're concerned about what the government is doing here or there. You're concerned about what violent people are doing here or there. Right where you are, you can do so much to change the world. Right where you are, you can do your part. But you have to go back and get it. You have to be able to do it now. You have to recognize that that little nudge within you that may think about calling this legislator, that person, the local school, or that organization that does this or does that, that's your soul calling forth you the opportunity to do more in our world. This teaching is not a religion built in such a way so that we can build idols of nothingness, cathedrals, churches, buildings, and not recognize that there's something in us that can build cathedrals of human beings, that can make temples of the youth, that we don't have to bend down and worship them, but we can lift them up out of the limited idea that the world, the media, even their own parents are trying to tell us about them. Because sometimes it's better for you to see the child than the parent, because the parent and child dynamic is one thing. Most of us, if we had a community around us when we were children, knows that the community around us often seeded things into our lives that our parents could never. Yeah. My father, as he began to raise me as a single dad, surrounded himself with people who were more advanced degrees, that had actually gone off to college and attended, and I got the fruit and the nourishment poured into the soil that I was raised in, because he surrounded me with a community of people that when he couldn't talk to me, and when I didn't understand why we were going to therapy, so I got even more annoying, because I was annoyed, so I'm going to be annoying. Isn't that how it works as a kid? But if you'll go back and get it, the world will be a better place.